Stage fright. Is there a cure? When performing in public, some young musicians become so self-conscious and anxious that they forget what notes to play. But why? Typically, because when they practice, they never consciously notice the music and its structure. Instead, they learn the music unconsciously by repeating it over and over. They play by habit on automatic pilot. While this weak learning may be sufficient for playing alone at home, it often fails under the stress of performing in public. Is there a way to overcome stage fright? Yes, students can minimize performance anxiety in several ways. One of the most effective strategies is to learn to move in a way that minimizes tension and maximizes efficiency. Because this kind of technique facilitates accurate performance, it builds confidence and reduces anxiety. Another highly effective strategy to overcome stage fright is to study the structure of the music in detail to achieve a conscious awareness of it in every respect. To master this vital component of performing success, music students must acquire an in-depth understanding of music theory. Equipped with that knowledge, they must habitually analyze and consciously notice every aspect of a musical work as they learn to play it. To help with this, Dr. Mozart workbooks are carefully designed to increase your students' conscious awareness of music. Here's a very basic example where beginning students are exposed to some incorrect keyboard patterns. This exercise will sharpen your students' awareness of what a keyboard should really look like, and this exercise is all the more effective because kids think it's funny. Finding mistakes is fun for students. It puts them in charge, and it helps them consciously notice the correct way of doing things. Here, a mathematical approach is taken to help your students understand musical time. Rests and notes are mixed to ensure that your students understand how they can have equivalent time values. And here, your students will enjoy tapping some entertaining rhythms while they learn about some new time signatures. No matter what teaching method is employed, Dr. Mozart always includes some fun, because when students enjoy their work, they stay interested and involved, and they learn better. Dr. Mozart employs multiple methods not only for teaching rhythm notation, but for teaching staff notation too. This page reminds students how to remember some important landmark notes. A giraffe helps them remember the top G, while a foot helps them remember the bottom F. On the other hand, reading by intervals is also encouraged. This particular exercise asks your students to write a note that is one semitone above or below the given note, following the direction of the arrows. As well, your students will explore various patterns in staff notation. Here, the notes are colored to help your students learn what octaves look like on the staff. Notes having the same name are colored the same to help your students notice the pattern. By naming these notes, your students will realize that even though a particular treble staff note and bass staff note look the same, their names are nonetheless different. Here is a more advanced exercise that focuses again on the difference between treble staff and bass staff notation. In this case, instead of being asked to name the notes are already named. What is missing in each case is the clef. Students must choose whichever clef matches the way each note is already named. This will heighten your students' awareness of the difference between treble staff and bass staff notation. Dr. Mozart will also teach your students to recognize black key enharmonic notes and white key enharmonic notes. Helpful keyboard diagrams are provided to facilitate learning. To prepare young minds to learn about intervals, Dr. Mozart starts by teaching students the difference between a skip and a step. This knowledge prepares them to learn about intervals in depth in subsequent Dr. Mozart workbooks. For example, your students will eventually encounter whole steps that contain both a white key and a black key. They will learn in detail how to write these whole steps two different ways using enharmonic notes. When it comes to thirds, most theory workbooks don't explain that every minor third can be calculated two different ways, but Dr. Mozart does explain this important practical fact in detail. Your students will learn that a minor third can be made with a whole step and a half step, or with a half step and a whole step. If a third contains a black key, is it easier to write the black key with a sharp or a flat? This page answers that question. It will help your students write thirds that contain one or more black keys. This is just one example of the many ways that Dr. Mozart teaches theory in depth to help your students achieve superior results. Students using most other theory workbooks would have trouble with this exercise. It requires rewriting a black key, white key whole step using enharmonic notes. But your students can master it thanks to the consistent and systematic training they will get from Dr. Mozart. Similarly, these sharps and flats may look intimidating, but Dr. Mozart carefully prepares your students for the challenge in advance. Your students will already know enough to understand that these are black key major seconds named two different ways. Most perfect fourths and fifths are made with either two white keys or two black keys, but a few are made with one white key and one black key. They are referred to as zebra intervals in Dr. Mozart workbooks to help students become aware of them and recognize them more quickly. One way to learn theory in depth is to consider each theory concept from various perspectives. Scales are a good example. Here, the colored keys on these keyboards represent different scales or tonalities. The top keyboard shows the B-flat major scale, and the second keyboard shows F major. Students are asked to identify the scales shown by the color keys. They must then draw a line to show which notes differ from one scale to the next. For example, the B-flat major scale includes an E-flat, which is not found in the F major scale. So a line must be drawn from E-flat to E natural. This exercise can help your students recognize the tonality of whatever music they are learning on their musical instrument. Your students will also get practice at writing whatever key signature matches a given set of black keys on the keyboard. Again, the skill your students learn here can improve their ability to identify the tonality of whatever music they are learning on their instrument. This exercise will give your students practice at using a process of elimination to recognize the tonality of a piece of music. For example, the presence of an E-flat rules out all keys that have fewer than two flats. On this page, your students will be asked to identify the notes that differentiate one tonality from another. For example, the key of D major includes a C sharp, whereas the key of G major does not. Of course, your students should always know what key they are playing in to better understand the music they are practicing or performing. Students who consciously recognize such musical elements as tonality are more likely to remain confident and composed when performing in public. After learning about scales and intervals, students are ready to learn about major and minor triads. In this illustration, the root, third, and fifth of a triad are personified as a flower bulb and two flowers. The white and purple flowers represent the major and minor thirds, respectively. Of course, in actual music, a triad does not exist in isolation. This is why primary triads are normally named and numbered according to their position in the scale. But Dr. Mozart goes a step further with some illustrations to help students remember. For practice with that concept, your students will be asked to mark various primary triads on the keyboard when the only clues provided are the key and the degree of the scale. Your students will also learn about primary triads in harmonic minor scales. Notice the yellow minor's hat and the blue major's hat. They remind students that in a harmonic minor key, the dominant triad is major, whereas the other two primary triads are minor. In this exercise, your students must first choose the correct clef and then write the primary triads. To increase your students' awareness of triad structure, this exercise provides only the major or minor third of each triad. Based on that information alone, your students must complete each triad. By considering triads from different perspectives like this, your students can learn to understand triads more clearly. Most triads can belong to more than one key. Knowing this can help your students understand how a piece of music can modulate from one key to another. This is yet another example of the kind of awareness that can help your students stay focused when performing complex music in public. Exercises like this one offer some hands-on creative practice which will help your students integrate the diverse music theory concepts they learn in Dr. Mozart workbooks. Dr. Mozart music theory workbooks are not just fun, they also teach music theory in depth. And learning music theory in depth can help your students overcome stage fright and perform with greater confidence and success in public.